Hello and welcome back to my channel. This is a follow-up to my last video where I showed you this 32MB module that doesn't work. One or more memory chips on this module are faulty and cause random crashes when used. I want to see if it is possible to figure out which of the chips is faulty by using tools like memtest86+, motherboard schematics, and understanding how the memory module and the chips are connected. Unfortunately, my last video ended with a lot of guesses and so far I was not able to come up with a definite answer. But you gave me a lot of nice ideas in the comments what I could try to narrow down or identify the faulty chip. Your suggestions ranged from taping over contacts, lifting individual pins of memory chips, experimenting with temperature, and much more. In today's video, I will try a few of those ideas and see if they help narrowing down the chips that could be faulty. Let's start with taping off contacts on the memory module. Under the microscope, I cut a very thin piece of Kapton tape, just large enough to cover one of the golden pins. Although it looks like there are pins on both sides of the module, the pins opposing each other are actually connected. Under the microscope we can see small holes on the contacts. Those holes, called vias, connect the pins on this side to the pins on the opposite side. So when taping, I need to make sure that the pin is covered on both sides. Let's try this memory module in a motherboard. Unfortunately, the system doesn't boot. Let's stop here for a moment and think about what we did by taping off one of the contacts. The module with the taped contact pin no longer sends 32 bits to the CPU. This is because the 32 data lines are shared between both sides of the memory module. The chips U1 and U9, for instance, share this data pin for data line D0. U4 and U12 share this data line for D20, and U7 shares this pin with U15 on data line D12. Taping over one single contact renders the entire module unusable. But we are not yet done. One of you suggested to combine the two 32MB modules, one of them being the module with the taped pin, with other modules to make sure we have at least the basic memory available for the system to start. So I went through my drawers and found these two 8MB modules. I will install them in SIMM sockets 1 and 2, while the two 32MB modules go in SIMM sockets 3 and 4. And wouldn't you know, the system boots! However, I got different behavior depending on which data pin was taped over. Sometimes the 32MB modules were not detected at all, and the total system memory remained at 16MB. Changing the tape to a different pin allowed the system to recognize the expected 80MB during booting. But the moment any program accesses the memory area that resides on the 32MB modules, the system just crashes. Surprisingly, the BIOS did not detect any issues with the memory. Although a very interesting idea, taping off contacts does not help us and actually renders the memory module unusable. Let's move on and see if temperature makes a difference. The module seems to be working fine for about 30 minutes. That is one pass through all tests in memtest86+. During the second pass, however, memory errors appear. This could be related to heat. So I decided to heat up individual chips or group of chips and see if I can spot a difference in the behavior of this memory module. I even crafted those little helpers made out of cardboard, which were supposed to protect other chips that I didn't want to heat up. In the end, this was quite difficult because the heat spreads quickly through the PCB and heats up surrounding chips as well as chips located on the opposite side of the memory module. But it didn't matter. Even after several tries, I couldn't notice any change in the behavior of the memory. Maybe cooling the chips would help to figure out if temperature is really the root cause of the memory errors. I put a strong fan right above the memory modules, but even this did not prevent the memory errors from appearing. Same as without a fan, the memory errors appeared during the second pass of memtest86+. Maybe I could have further reduced the temperature with the help of compressed air, but I wasn't convinced that this would be worth the trouble. So far, none of my attempts seem to have made a difference. Once memory errors appear, the module stays in this faulty state and immediately produces memory errors in memtest86+. But also SpeedSys reports errors while testing the memory, and even the BIOS finally notices that something is wrong. To reset the module, the only thing that I have found to be working is to leave the module unpowered for about an hour. Only then does the memory module pass the first run through memtest86+ and starts failing during the second pass. If we cannot reliably make the module fail with the previous methods, then maybe we could try to simulate memory errors. Here is a warning. The next part is dangerous and could potentially destroy your hardware if you're not careful. The idea is to short data pins of individual chips and see which bits are failing. With the help of the error bits value reported by memtest86+, we may be able to spot a pattern that may reveal the faulty chip. Shorting data pins is similar to what I did to trick the BIOS of the ASUS P3BF into believing that its main program is corrupt and activating the boot block recovery program. Yeah, I'm at that stage. Desperation. But there are, of course, a few challenges that come with this method. First, if you don't want to solder countless wires to the memory chips, you need a special tool. This clamp, which was part of my new BIOS programmer that you will see on my channel very soon, is able to clip on the memory chips. I think this clamp was meant to be used on BIOS chips, but it looks like it works perfectly on these memory chips as well. The clamp has 8 contacts in total, 4 on each side. 4 of those contacts need to connect to the data pins of the memory chip. Once connected, I can short 2 data pins and hopefully generate memory errors on demand while memtest86+ is testing the memory. For this test, I'm using a verified working module that is identical to the faulty module. This ensures that any errors reported by memtest86+ are actually caused by me shorting the data pins. And one more time. This method is extremely dangerous because ground and power source are right below those data pins. One wrong connection or a bridge and you may end up pushing 5 volts through the data line. I don't know what will happen, but my guess is that your memory chip will not be the only component that will go up in smoke. Those data lines are connected directly to the memory controller, which is integrated into the chipset of the motherboard. I hope I warned you enough and you see that this is probably a method not worth trying. This is a double-sided memory module with 8 memory chips on each side. 8 memory chips saturate the 32-bit data bus going from the memory module to the memory controller. That means memory chips on side A share the same data lines with memory chips on side B. If I'm shorting the data pins of, let's say, memory chip U1, I also short U9 because they are connected to the same data lines. So again, we would not get a clear answer because there are always 2 chips sharing the same data lines. But maybe with this method and using the process of elimination, we will be able to identify good memory chips. Now, if you think that I would be satisfied by testing just one side of the memory module, because arguably the other side is connected to the same data pins, you will be mistaken. Curiosity sometimes gets the better of me. But there is a problem. The ASUS board does not have enough space to test side B of the module because power supply connector and PCI slots are in the way. Luckily, I happen to have this motherboard from Abit that surprisingly has memory slots rotated by 180 degrees. So here I have access to side B of the memory module and I can test the module in another motherboard. First, I need to establish a baseline and see how the module is failing in each board. I am focusing on the error bits value reported by memtest86+. On the ASUS P55T2B4, the faulty module is installed in SIMM socket 2. The faulty value is reported at position 3. On the Abit PT5, the faulty module is installed in SIMM socket 3, as per the markings on the motherboard. And on this board, the faulty value is reported at position 1. Later, I will try to simulate a similar pattern by shorting data pins of individual memory chips. As test, I decided to use test number 9 in memtest86+, because it writes random bytes and takes quite a bit to finish. Let's start with the ASUS board and side A of the memory module. The faulty module produces errors on position 3, and the simulated error bits for the individual chips are as follows. U1 reports at location 7 and 8. That is a bit unexpected, but it may all be related to how the data lines are connected to the memory controller and the CPU. All I can say at the moment is that this is not the pattern we are looking for. Let's move on. U2 also reports on location 7 and 8. And so does U3 as well as U4. Great. I did not expect those 4 chips to all report errors on the same byte. But let's just continue and see what values we get for the other chips. U5 reports errors on location 3. That matches the pattern we are looking for. Interesting. But then U6 comes along and spoils the party by also reporting errors on location 3. Another match. U7 reports on location 4. And so does U8, also reporting on location 4. I summarized the values I got from memtest, including their respective location, and put them into this table. Not really a nice pattern to be honest. But based on this data, U5 and U6 could be the problem. But at the same time, we shouldn't forget the chips on the other side of the memory module that are connected to the same data lines. It could also be U13 or U14. I think it's better to move on to the 8-bit board and see what we get there. Remember that although we are testing the other side of the memory module now, we are essentially shorting the same data pins that we shorted using the ASUS board. Let's remind ourselves that the error on the 8-bit board was reported on location 1. And here are the simulated errors for each memory chip. U9 reports on location 7, U10 on location 5, U11 on location 8, U12 on location 6, U13 on location 3, and U14 reports on location 1. Hey, we have a match! U15 reports on location 4, and finally U16 reports on location 2. And here is the summary. This looks like a much nicer pattern compared to the ASUS board. Based on those results, chip 14 is to blame. The corresponding memory chip to U14 on side A is U6. Interestingly, we also had U6 singled out on the ASUS board. I don't know if we get any closer, to be honest, but if you'd ask me now, I would bet on U6 to be the faulty chip, closely followed by U5. I still do not believe that the faulty chip is located on side B. But if I had an option to rank the chips on likelihood of being faulty, my order would be as follows: U6, U5, U14, and finally U13. Well, that would mean that the other 12 chips are good, right? If you enjoyed the video so far and like the immense amount of work that I have put into making this video, please hit the thumbs up. This helps the channel and motivates me making more of those videos. You can also check out my Patreon if you'd like to support this channel even further. Let's mix memory modules with different sizes. Wait, what? I'm sure you have heard that you cannot mix memory modules of different sizes. And to be transparent, I also thought you always have to pair memory modules of the same type and size. In a normal use case, that makes perfect sense, but our case is far from normal. Mixing memory modules may give us the edge we need to narrow down the group of chips which contains the faulty one. Here are 16 MB modules, single-sided. What happens when we mix a 16 MB module with a 32 MB module? On the ASUS P55T2P4, the BIOS reports 64 MB while booting, regardless in which order the two modules are inserted in the memory sockets. In other words, it makes no difference if the 16 MB module is inserted in SIMM socket 1 or 2. The 32 MB module goes in the other socket of the same memory bank. In both cases, the BIOS reports 64 MB, but will not continue to boot afterwards. The system remains stuck right at this point. Let's do the same now on the 8-bit board. Unfortunately, the manual I found online does not really match my board. Maybe it is for a different revision, but you can see that in the manual, SIMM 1 and SIMM 2 should be part of Memory Bank 0, while on the board, Memory Bank 0 has sockets labeled SIMM 3 and SIMM 4. But it doesn't really matter, I will just tell you in which SIMM socket the 16 MB module is installed. When starting the PC with the 16 MB module in SIMM 1 and the 32 MB module in SIMM 2, the PC boots but gets stuck at counting the memory. At 640 KB, the counter stops. And that is as far as we get. Similar to the ASUS board, it looks like the 8-bit board cannot deal with different sized memory modules in the same memory bank. Or can it? Let's switch the modules. With the 16 MB module now in SIMM 2 and the 32 MB module in SIMM 1, we boot. And the board keeps counting up to 32 MB. Interesting. And the 8-bit continues past the memory check. This board seems to be able to work with two differently sized memory modules. The smaller module determines the amount of the memory used from the larger module. You know what's coming now, right? Memtest 86 Plus, of course. If Memtest 86 Plus will not find any errors, then we can assume that the faulty memory chip is not part of the chips that are used in this case. But after some time, MemoryTest 86 Plus reports memory errors. And it is in an all too familiar pattern. After a successful first pass, we get memory errors at some point halfway through the second pass. In this state, the 8-bit board also reports a problem with the memory when I reboot the system. Now let's see if we can figure out which chips are used when using only 16 MB of the 32 MB module. A reasonable guess would be that only chips on side A are used. It would mimic the physical appearance of the 16MB module, and we know that the chips on the opposite side of the memory module share the same data lines. But I'm not 100% sure. At the moment, I would argue that any memory chip on side B is in working condition. By the way, I tested this exact scenario with an identical working 32MB module. After 4 passes and over an hour of memtest 86+, no errors were reported. So, mixing memory modules will not cause memory errors on this board, but it is interesting to see that the 8-bit board actually works with modules of different size. I even went ahead and tested an 8MB module paired with a faulty 32MB module. And wouldn't you know, we get 16MB of total system memory while booting. What do you think? Do we get memory errors when using only 8MB of the 32MB module? Well, here's the answer. No, we don't. So what does that mean? Well, if you remember from my previous video, memory chips on the 32-bit data bus are filled equally with data. Maybe I'm oversimplifying here, but using only 8MB of a 32MB module would eliminate half of the memory cells within each chip on one side. The memory errors appear in the other 50% of the memory cells. A fun experiment, but it won't help solve our quest to find the faulty chip. Let's look at another secret of 72-pin memory modules. Based on the specification, 72-pin modules have 4 dedicated pins that can tell the motherboard what type of memory is installed. Those so-called presence detect pins can be controlled by pads that can be found on most memory PCBs and are usually located somewhere around pin 72. On this memory module from IBM, which supports parity functionality, pins 68 and 69 are connected to ground through 0-ohm resistors. In this table we can see that such a module should have 32MB and memory chips rated at 70 nanoseconds. The 16MB module I have used before is non-parity and also has those pads configured. Pin 67 is connected to ground, indicating a 16MB module with chips rated for 60 nanoseconds. The memory module with a faulty memory chip also has those pads, but they are not populated. The table tells us that this means free or invalid. I guess it is time to see if we can force this memory module to operate as a 16MB module. We can verify a working modification by pairing it with a real 16MB module and test the pair in the ASUS or even the 8-bit board. To configure a 16MB non-parity module, we need to connect pin 67 to ground. By the way, I'm using a new soldering iron. This pen size tool was provided to me by FNIRSI. This is the HS01 soldering iron. Soon you will see a dedicated review video on my channel. It will go head-to-head against my old Welle soldering station. You can already find a link to the product in the video description, in case you want to check it out. Since I don't have a 0-ohm resistor, I botched this bridge on top of the pads. But unfortunately, it made no difference. Both boards, the ASUS and the 8-bit, ignored the presence detect pins and the modules behaved exactly like before. They stopped while or after counting the memory. I guess it depends on the board being used and if it really relies on the information from those presence detect pins. And to conclude this section, the 8MB module has those pads as well, but they are also not populated. Another suggestion was to check the solder joints between the PCB and the memory chips. I used my new soldering iron to resolder each single pin of all memory modules. But it did not make any difference. The memory errors were still there. What else could be done at this point? I could try to desolder memory chips and see how the system behaves. By removing, let's say, all chips on side B, I could literally turn this module into a 16MB module. It is still not clear what side is used when the module operates at half its total capacity, but I have a strong suspicion that side A is utilized. So I desoldered U9 first and tested the module. I installed a real 16MB module and this one with one chip missing. Okay, what's going on now? Only 16MB are detected. So we can only speculate right now. There is a 64-bit data bus going from the memory controller to the memory SIMMs, but it looks like we are running on a single memory module only? How is that possible? Or do we use 8MB of each module? I have no explanation. I can only report that memtest 86+ did not find any errors even after several passes. Now I wanted to know. So I reattached U9 again and desoldered U1. remove the chip from the other side just to see what happens. But I got the exact same behavior. Then I reattached U1 and removed all chips from side B, but the behavior remained unchanged. I tested a few configurations to see if there was any decrease in memory throughput, and I even compared it with another set of memory modules, but there was absolutely no difference in throughput. I really don't know what's going on here. If you can explain why it looks like we are running on one memory module only, please let me know in the comments. If you made it that far, congratulations! This is the longest video I've created for this channel. I didn't feel like splitting this topic into multiple videos because many things are related and it shows the steps I went through. But here we are. I desoldered all the memory chips from side B of the module, and I believe that those chips are all in working condition, and I will change my answer to which chip is faulty to U6. Again a guess, but it is based on new information that has been uncovered in this video. In a future video, I will try to create 4 memory modules with the 8 desoldered chips and try to use them in my 386 board. I am aware that those chips are extended data out or EDO chips, and the 386 will only support fast page mode or FPM memory. But I will show you next time why I believe those chips should work. Hopefully. And if they work, we can run memtest 86 Plus against those modules and check if those chips are indeed in working condition. As we conclude this lengthy video, I would like to express my deepest gratitude for your support. If you enjoyed the content, please leave a like and drop a comment below. I read through each and every comment, even though I may not be able to respond to all of them. I'm also immensely thankful to all my Patreons who generously support this channel. Thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next video.